There goes.
Are you starting it out or are we?
We're live.
We're live?
We're live, boys.
Good.
Awesome,
All right.
guy.
Welcome to Mack's Lures. First, we got two guinea pigs here because this is our first live Facebook show. And tonight we are going to talk all about ice fishing. We have Eric Magnuson, Mack's Lure Pro Staff, Clumdog Outdoors team member, and Brian Clum with us, who started Clumdog Outdoors. And these guys know a little bit about ice fishing.
We like to think so.
Yeah.
So what have you guys been up to? We got people joining right now. We're just going to take a few minutes to let a few more people join, and then we'll get into the seminar. But I'm going to let Brian and Eric kind of introduce themselves and kind of talk about what Clumdog Outdoors is and what they do out on the ice.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Eric Magnuson, of course, and I'm a professional angler and a promoter in the fishing industry. I've promoted products and fished across the fished across the states really for the last 10 years, and been really, just blessed to be with a lot of the companies, and Mack's Lures included.
Yeah. I'm Brian Clum, Clumdog Outdoors. Professional fishing guide. I guide in the open water and also on the ice. One of the only ice fishing guys in the state of Washington. There's a couple others, but so yeah, that's what I do for a full-time gig. And just got back from Flaming Gorge, Wyoming. Spent 6 days down there. Me and my wife put 55 hours in on the ice, and then I drove from Green River, Wyoming to Salt Lake. Flew from Salt Lake home. Drove an hour and a half home. Dropped off the wife and came here to Eric's house, and here I am. So I'm a little beat. My nose is all busted up, but I'm here ready to talk ice fishing with you guys, just like Eric.
We don't want any excuses, so.
Oh, no excuse.
Yeah, so if he falls asleep, it'll be like weekend at Bernie's.
So how did Flaming Gorge go?
Flaming Gorge went great, man. The weather was brutal. I mean, typical Wyoming, 30-mile-an-hour winds. We ended up hiking about 20 miles total. The spots that we finally found the Lakers on, it was a mile hike in, a mile hike out. So it was, we put in a lot of work. We definitely earned the fish that we caught, and we ended up catching a couple over 10 pounds and quite a few numbers of fish. So all in all, it was a great adventure.
Good stuff. What have you been doing, Eric?
I've been doing a little bit of everything. A little bit of crappie fishing, some perch fishing. I'm always catching perch. I love perch fishing. They call me the perk pounder. So other than perch fishing, I've also been on a great burbot by multiple lakes around North Washington here, northeastern Washington. I've been picking up on the burbot. And the sonic bait fish actually there from Mack's Lures, the glow, anything glow has been working amazing for the burbot. So just been chasing a lot of burbot, spending as much time on the ice as I can. Before it comes to an end, we still got a little bit of a month or a little bit better than a month to go.
Yeah. I'm heading up in the morning to go hit Curlew. First time. My first time ice fishing was actually with you, Eric.
Yeah, you got spoiled and went to Cascade with us last year. And now you're going to go to another great perch fishery with has great sized perch in there and numbers as well. But yeah, you'll have a great time. And you're going with Bobby and Robin?
Bobby Schindler and Robin Schindler, yep, Western Ice Fishing Association. I'm excited to go out with them. They'll take good care of us, teach us the ropes.
Yeah, great
Absolutely
people.
Great people.
Yeah, we know them pretty well. They're really good people.
Yeah.
We're pretty lucky. We're gonna go film a show with Richie Harrod Outdoors, and it'll be fun. Heard there was fish has been pretty good, so I'm excited. I'm actually excited more now to learn from you guys about how I'm gonna catch all those fish. So if you guys are ready, we got a bunch of people in here. Let's get after it.
Sweet. So we're probably gonna start out. Anytime you go ice fishing, the main thing is safety. We're not going to touch on it for too long, but safety is a huge main concern, especially once we start getting toward the end of the season, which we're not really at the end of the season, but you never know. The ice conditions vary all the time. So the main thing when it does come down to safety, ice picks. I mean, that's a main thing. If you do fall through the ice, that's what's going to give you the opportunity to spud and pull yourself out. If you guys see us out there, most of the year we're going to be having these ice picks on our neck.
Yeah, from 4 inches to 17, I just tend to wear them because ice, like you said, ice can vary in spots, and you just never know. I mean, I'd rather have them than not.
Yeah. And then also,
and we always carry this emergency throw rope. It actually has 50 feet of rope. You can toss the bag. It comes uncoiled very easily. And if you don't have one of these, just carry a chunk of rope. Just carry a 50-foot chunk of rope, 25-foot chunk of rope. Mm-hmm. It's good to have just in the bottom of your sled or just on your side.
Yeah. When it comes to ice fishing, it's more of expect the worst and hope for the best. I mean, we've been doing it for so long. We understand how to read ice conditions. A spud bar is also going to be your best friend. You can go out there, hit the spud bar down one time. You're probably going to punch through 2.5 inches. If you spud twice and it doesn't break through, you're probably okay. But that's gonna show you how the ice conditions are and how to read them, on top of having the safety equipment. So kind of expect the worst, hope for the best. You're always going to have great fit or great ice as long as you know how to read it. And that's where, if you don't know how to read it or you get into a sketchy situation, there's an underwater spring, whatever it is, there's certain things that can cause smaller or thinner ice conditions. So that's where the safety stuff kind of comes in. And also, I got majority of us wear these bibs. This is a bib from Ice Armor made by Clam. They'll float you just like a safety device. Yeah. They're not rated like Coast Guard safety, but I've had the chance to test them out last year. So yes, you did.
They floated me. I just had the bibs on. I didn't have my coat, but the coat as well will float you. But just the bibs alone, that's another little safety factor itself. Great investment if you can. I recommend them. Yeah. Keeps you warm, keeps you dry, keeps you topside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, last year it was you guys were fishing out of
Hauser, Idaho.
Yeah, Hauser Lake, and
fell in a little bit of a weak spot.
Yeah.
And
you got to go a little bit deeper. So basically, what had happened is the fire rescue team was out there, and if you know anything about Hauser or a bunch of other lakes, the fire rescue team will come out there. They'll cut a big, giant chunk of ice out, shove it underneath, and then they'll start doing their safety diving and testing their equipment. And what had happened was the ice was good. They still had it marked, and then, so they had it marked out with stringers. Ice conditions were good, so they pulled the markers, and then in the next couple of days, it got pretty thin, and a gentleman was calling you over to the dock, telling you that it wasn't safe.
Yeah.
And walked you right into that hole when he fell through, but popped right up too.
Popped right up. It stayed pretty dry, so it was nice.
Yeah, it was really nice.
And that's another thing too. When he says, expect the worst, hope for the best. That just doesn't mean safety. It also means having the right gear.
Yeah. And the fish too.
And the fish, but don't go out there without the right boots or the right pants. I always say gloves. I always say overdress because you can always take your clothes off. If you don't have them, you can't put it on. So, but always have the right gear.
Part of being safe is being warm. If you're out there and you're freezing cold or sweating, that's a big issue I have being a ice guide. Is I'll show up an hour before the clients get there. I'll hike all the gear out, 100 plus pounds of gear, set up the hut, set up the chairs, set up the fish finders.
And that might be multiple trips.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes multiple trips, and I got to hike all the way back, meet the clients. So by that time, I'm sweating pretty bad. And when you start sweating like that on the ice, that's when it really gets dangerous. And you need a hut, you need a heater, you need something to help dry you out and keep you warm. Because if you're sweating, anybody knows anything about being outside or hunting or anything like that, you're outside and you're sweating and it's cold out, that's when it gets to be a dangerous situation.
And that's why I recommend on first date as well. It's like being able to treat hypothermia and knowing what to look for, that's key as well.
Yeah, for how much time we spend out there and guiding and stuff like that, I have to have my medical card. I got to have all the safety stuff. You never know what's going to happen. Even in a boat, somebody can fall overboard. You need to know CPR. You need to know how to treat hypothermia, how to treat burns and cuts. You get cut all the time when you're fishing. Evan O'Mara, we went out to Lake Cascade, and the whole team went out there and we were fishing. Evan was holding, he's a Clumdog Outdoors, Evan O'Mara. He was holding 5 perch. He had 3 in one hand, 2 in another, and taking a picture, which was a really cool picture, but he ended up cutting I think it was his pointer finger or something.
Yeah.
but it cut so deep on the gill plate that his finger completely swelled up, had to have it drained, and almost lost his finger.
Almost lost his finger.
Yeah, it was bad. So a lot of safety stuff, but other than that, what we got? Species-specific lures.
Yeah, safety's number one, but how do we catch them?
How do we catch them? Okay, so so there's so many different species, and that's what's nice about here in our area. We got burbot, lakers, largies, smallies, crappie, perch, bluegill, tiger muskie, kokanee, rainbows, tiger trout. There's a whole plethora of species of fish out here, but you mainly do a lot of perch fishing, and so do I as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of just known for I chase a lot of panfish. I grew up steelhead and trout fishing and a little bit of salmon fishing, but the majority of it's my love for pan fishing. And if I'm chasing panfish specifically, let's say crappie, for instance, ice fishing, I try to get out on the ice at dark. I'm targeting them at low light conditions at first. This is if I'm fishing throughout the day. But if I'm targeting, I'm always going to start with like a spoon, something like here, like the humdinger, something light, something that flutters, get some attraction, possibly even something that glows. But I like to start on the low light conditions.
But what kind of structure? Because that's the main thing when it comes to crappie. Crappie are not very structure dependent when it comes to wintertime.
No, they seem to more roam. And they're more suspended as well. I mean, crappie are tended to be suspended, but they're not too far from underneath the ice. I found crappie just 12 inches under the ice. So,
really?
Yeah. But structure-wise, I'm looking for the weeds. I'm looking for either down limbs or trees inside the water. Some submerged. Not so much rocks, but more brushy piles myself.
Even in the wintertime?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, for me, which is the great thing about fishermen is everybody does something different. My primary thing, if I'm going to target crappie, I'm going to head out to the main basin. I'm going to stick to the 30 to 40 foot basin with no structure. And then I'm just going to work 10, 15, 30 holes, just run a straight line, fish one, 5 minutes, fish one, 5 minutes, and see which ones are coming. Because you said they're roaming.
And that's the thing, they're roaming those basins. And that's true, but that's the thing too, I guess I'm thinking too. I'm thinking of the lake I'm fishing.
And I'm thinking of the lake I'm fishing.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of a lake that's like 15 feet deep at most, and he's thinking of more of a basin lake.
That's very true.
And that's going to play key. But no, structure is a thing.
Yeah.
And fish finders, I mean, we use Vexlars, and that's going to tell you too what's roaming, where they're at.
And not only that, but especially when it comes down to crappie, when you get on a really good crappie bite, they're going to zoom up and they're going to hammer it. You can be sitting, say we're fishing 15 feet of water. You're going to be sitting 4 feet off the bottom, kind of working that. If with the fish finders, you see a mark come up above you, reel right up to it and kind of jig right in its face. But sometimes crappie just like to chase. I mean, it's one of those things, kind of like lake trout. You can jig a crappie up, and once he engages, you can just start reeling and pull it away, and he'll hammer it. But that's usually higher in the water column. I personally don't catch a lot of crappie based off the bottom.
No, not off the bottom.
No,
I don't fish the bottom for crappie. I'm usually fishing mid-column or just below the ice. I grew up fishing, when I ice fished before fish finders, we grew up with lanterns. Yeah, I'm that old. We grew up with lanterns that just sat right above our holes, and that just drew in enough of the plankton and the little minnows, and the crappies are right there. But if I'm going after crappies, I'm starting low light conditions before the day starts, usually starting with a spoon. Maybe working myself down smaller tungsten, but usually typically something that glows.
Yeah, for sure. And since you mentioned the lights, when it comes down to those, because they have underwater lights, which are really nice. It's a tube with a string of LEDs going around it. You can use some of the other lights that it's basically just a car headlight wrapped in styrofoam.
Yeah.
But basically when it comes to those light conditions, like Eric was saying, it brings in the zooplankton, it brings in the bugs, which brings in the entire column of fish, or the life cycle of fish. But one thing that technique is very productive for is rainbows and kokanee.
Yes, kokanee as well.
Eric is a huge kokanee fisherman. He spends a lot of time out at Loon Lake. He did a video with Mack's Lures out there.
Yeah, with Richie.
And so when it comes to kokanee, those underwater lights are a very key thing to have.
And that's another thing. If I'm going after kokanee as well, and if I'm going out at night, just that Max glow hook as well. If you just hit it with a little bit of LED or this UV light, it doesn't take much to glow them up.
Actually worked really well.
It does. I find the kokanee just go crazy over something really light. But during the daytime, if I go and I have something right here, just because again it's one of my favorites, and it's something kind of Frankensteinish, and it's nothing new. Everyone knows about it, but there's a lot of people that I pull it out and they think they're going to jig a trolling spoon, and sure enough, you just take that 4-inch trolling spoon there, and again, I got a treble hook on there. I'm not a big treble hook fan, but this is what I was using for finicky biters. Again, just blow it up. Doesn't take much. Typically, if I'm not using corn, I'm using just maggots. But during the daytime, that is a hot presentation for kokanee. Right there. Very simple.
So how does that, I've never ran this approach. And so is that one of those things where you jig it up and you just kind of follow it
you
down?
let
Or
that
do you
flutter
let it,
like a spoon.
let it just flutter and
Let it
fall
flutter.
down? Which is going to send off a shine, send off a vibration, which is going to key into kokanee.
Now,
And
how big's your leader on there, Eric?
That's about 10 inches, maybe almost 12.
Yeah.
I usually typically like a little shorter myself, but
yeah,
I think I tied this up for a demo.
Do you ever get tangled up? So
I have.
And that's the main thing. Would you want to?
And that's the thing. Depending on how the fish are reacting to this presentation, depending on my cadence is how I'm going to play it. If I don't technically have to rip it, but I've had that hook, depending on if it's the treble hook or just the single hook, I've had it lay up into my leaders or my barrel swivels. Typically what I like to do too with that, or how I see that, when I'm fishing with a Vexlar, I'll see that separation. I'll see my spoon. I'll see my hook. So
I don't know if it would pick it up.
yeah, no. So I'll see that separation. I'll see both presentations basically. So I'll know if it's working right. Same thing. What I'll do a lot of times, I'll take like the humdinger or the cripple lure, either one, and I'll take the hooks off those and just run a small little liter of mono or fluorocarbon to a glow hook or a fly, and again using that small thing as an attractant.
I think you did a jump off Joe.
Jump off Joe works great on perch, and I use it for perch typically because they got this. They got a vacuum. Once a perch comes in and they're going to eat it, they create a vacuum, and just that little bit of lights, it just gives it. Did we lose it?
We lost.
Okay.
We lost.
It just gives it something to suck in. It's not the hard bait that's just more solid and stationary. That's going to act as your attractant. You got a little bit of a separation. Once they create that vacuum, it just sucks right in their mouth.
Kind of like bass. You get a largemouth bass, he comes up there and he, which, yeah, I guess perch do kind of have that same thing. My main thought process is between bass and crappie, where they have that more of a bucket style mouth.
Yeah.
But yeah, perch do when they're in there and they're looking at it, even on the underwater cameras and stuff. They're looking at it, they're staring at it. Bait's right here, and they just open up and just suck it right in. Yeah, that makes sense for
Hey,
sure.
Brian, you want to go check your phone? It looks like the video cut out on it.
Oh, did it? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know science.
We can still hear you though.
Okay. Oh, there we are.
Looking good. We're back. Maybe.
What happened was one of my kids tried to call me. That's it.
We got a guy on here. Owen's asking thoughts on the crippler. You guys mentioned the crippler. He ordered a dozen or so, thinking it might be a good shiner presentation for walleye or a good attractor for rainbows. Curious what you guys typically use them for. Uh-oh.
So, like, he's asking about what would be a good presentation for walleye and rainbows. You're
Sure.
kind of cutting it.
Yeah, I think I should be back now. But he was just wondering. He wants to use cripplers jigging through the ice. We've had a bunch of guys using them. You know, it's more of the a spoon action, but using them for rainbows naked without the sling blade likely. if you've ever tried it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, typically not for walleye myself. It is a light lure. It would be a great walleye lure to jig underneath the ice if we had more of those lakes. You can go 2 hours from Spokane here and find some walleye. I haven't yet with that lure specifically, but I have caught a ton, and I'm saying a ton of trout with just this naked. Throw a worm on it, or maggots, or even a plastic, and it's a pretty deadly trout lure. But I know for a fact people back in Minnesota and back in the Midwest have been using them for walleye as well.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes down to, we didn't really go too much into the trout species when it comes to how to catch them and how to target them and what to use. Mainly, it's going to be that. It's going to be a crippled herring. It's going to be there's so many different ways you can do it.
The sonic bait
fish. Any of them. If you have a spoon and it flashes, and the main thing, the trout are coming through it high in the water column. I target the trout 10 feet below the ice is where I'll keep a jig at all times. You will catch a bunch of trout on the bottom, but 10 feet below the ice, especially at curlew, you're going to be out there at curlew.
Yep.
You drop it 10 feet below the ice and let it sit for 5 minutes, you're going to have a rainbow come through and hit it. But if you do have a flashier lure, like the crippler or something like that, in a silver and a gold pattern, and even chartreuse would be fine too, but it's an aggression strike. These trout are coming through high in the water column. They're striking out of aggression. You can't necessarily do wrong when you get a trout that's keyed in on it. You can pull up, you can drop it down, you can work that fish any way you want. He's going to hammer it. But yeah, something bright, shiny.
And there's times at curlew we try to play keep away from the trout, because you'll see on the Vexilars as your lures drop down to the bottom to the perch, those rainbows come chasing down. And you're like, no, like, I'm not here for you. But there's some nice fish. There's some really nice rainbows in there. You'll see here tomorrow when you get there.
Yeah. Richie just dropped in, and Richie went up to Canada. I can't remember. Richie can correct me in the comments, but it was a couple of years ago, and went and just hammered the brook trout. I posted a couple of videos of it this last couple of weeks with the crippler, and it is a good lure for trout in general. I'm just trying to get back to Owen. You started to touch on it, but J-Rod, one of our pro staffers, Jaime Rodriguez, asked a quick question about, what's your go-to presentation when you're jigging walleye through the ice, which is, it's a little rare around our part, but have you guys done it yet, and what would be a good presentation?
I have done it. I've made the run down south and done pretty well. Haven't caught a whole bunch of them, but the sonic bait fish would be a great presentation. It does have the eyelet right in the center of it. The main thing when it comes to walleye for me is I want a horizontal presentation. So it's either going to be a rip and wrap, it's going to be a sonic bait fish, it's going to be something that, any of these little lure. That's the one.
So this one here is a Euro tackle sea viper, something bigger, kind of like that. Something that looks like a bait fish, something with a rattle you can violently rip. The Rapala, was it the rip and wrap, the jig and wrap? Those are great walleye jigging lures.
Yeah.
Especially that rip and wrap.
I would say anything with a horizontal presentation that has some sort of noise or flash to it. It's going to be a fish that you're obviously snap jigging, which is awesome with walleyes. You can sit there with a horizontal bait, you can snap jig it, and it's going to dart to one side, it's going to dart to the other. It's going to have a flutter to it depending on the profile and presentation of bait you're using. But horizontal baits for me would be my go-to for any sort of walleye species, and then being able to work through the water column as well. They're not just going to be sucked to the bottom. You want to do the column climb and work through the water column, and that would be my go-to for walleye, especially through the ice.
Beautiful. One thing we haven't talked about yet, and Eric, you've been having a lot of fun on them, is the burbot. And Mike Pittenger, another pro staffer up in Canada, wanted to know early on, that was the first thing he wanted to know, was what is your go-to for burbot, and how are you fishing them?
So anything that glows or anything ugly. I always say they're ugly fish. They like ugly baits.
Sure.
And when I say ugly baits, this is actually a big nasty bait. Just something big that glows.
Glowing spoon.
Big glowing spoon. something heavy. Another one that works amazing, and I've had amazing luck this year, is that, again, that sonic bait fish, all the way up into that 1 ounce size. As long as it glows, it's going to produce fish. And what's great, again, with that sonic bait fish, you can fish it so many different ways, and doubled up on those ends with the hooks. I got cut bait on one side and maybe some worm, or I got both. It all depends, but something big, something real heavy. I'm pounding that bottom, creating that silt, creating a little disturbance, getting their attention. They don't have the best of eyesight, so that's why they really want that glow. I mean, they're going to key in on anything that moves or whatever, but if you got that glow, that's what I typically aim for.
You gotta, when it comes to burbot, because during the open water, I primarily guide for burbot in the late season and the early season, so I do a lot of guiding on the burbot in the open water. But the way I approach them is a vertical jigging technique. I'm slow rolling my boat, which I have the electric trolling motor bow mount, so I can set it at 0.3 mile an hour. And I can basically do a slow troll for the burbot. I can take I prefer a 1 ounce jig head or a 1 ounce spoon, tip it with a little bit of cut meat or worms or something like that. But as you're slow rolling at 0.3 mile an hour, you can snap it, let it hit the bottom, snap it, let it hit the bottom. The main thing, if you can get something, the baits that I've been using in the open water is kind of a bait that I designed. I took a 1 ounce jig head, put a squid skirt over the top of it, and inserted rattles into the head of the bait. Those rattles are going to be very important when it comes to burbot. Not only are they scent sensitive, but they are very noise sensitive as well. Their primary forage in a lot of our lakes is going to be crawdads. When crawdads are skirting across the bottom, not only are they creating that silt plume as they do their bounce, but they're also creating a little bit of click and a little bit of noise. They are a primary skeletal exoskeleton, however you put that.
Science, right?
So,
Any biologist?
yeah. They make noise as they go through. So if you can have a bait that matches their primary forage, has glow, has noise, and you pound the bottom.
And that's this, Max per se doesn't have the crawdad profile or paint job, but the burbot we were catching this winter were puking up a bunch of perch, so the perch pattern's amazing. But like Brian was saying, with the crawdads being their primary diet, which they are because they're full of crawdads as well. Yeah. Right there, that Procure crawdad scent. I mean, don't go burbot fishing without no Procure crawdad scent. Any crawdad scent. If it's just the crayfish or the garlic crayfish, that's going to put some fish topside for sure.
Match the hatch.
I need to get you some of the Max Lure UV bait scent crawfish.
Yes,
absolutely.
It's coming. It's on its way.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the ice formula too. Sometimes this stuff freezes up. That's another thing. If you're going to use it on the ice, tend to maybe get the ice formula. It doesn't freeze up as well. Mm-hmm. Stays more pliable.
So we haven't really talked about the small tungsten jigs. Greg and Casey Bruno asked, what knot do you guys use on the small jigs that you can only get the line through one time?
For me, it doesn't really matter what I'm fishing for. For the big Lakers that we were targeting at Flaming Gorge this week, when it comes all the way down to fishing for perch and bluegill, I tie an improved clinch knot across the board. Even when I'm tying a leader line, which we were running this week, we were running braid and then running a 15-pound mono leader. But even for ice fishing, if you're running 6-pound test, you want to drop down to a 3-pound leader, a 2-pound leader, depending how finicky the bite is. My weird way of doing it is I tie a double improved clinch knot on either side. There's obviously a lot of different knots to tie, but
yeah, I strictly go Palomar knot. But if I'm not going to go a Palomar knot, if I can only get it through one time, I'm just going to do that simple fisherman's knot, and that holds just fine. I've caught some pretty big fish on 2-3 pound tests with just a simple fisherman's knot.
What's the fisherman's knot?
Yeah, what is it? Just the clinch or whatever?
Oh, the improved clinch?
Yeah.
So basically, run it through the eyelet. I take it with my finger and twist it 7 times, go back through the hole, and that's the clinch knot or the improved clinch knot. So yeah.
Where you run your tag in through the bottom, you can pull that, just cinch it down. But yeah, typically just one of your simple fisherman's knots.
Yeah.
Sure. Somehow we haven't talked a lot about perch yet.
Perch, man, that's the primary go-to for our area.
Let's talk perch.
We're going to be at Lake Cascade and doing the Cascade Cup, so that's coming up. Eric and I have spent a lot of time. I think, Eric, you spent more time out there at Cascade than I have, but we've caught some jumbos out of there. And then up here locally, we got Curlew.
Yep.
Very great perch fishery. Sasheen this year is producing a lot of small perch.
In
abundance, but they're really small. Diamond Lake has actually been pumping. I got a couple 11 and 3/4 at Diamond Lake.
I was able to hit a loika this last weekend. Yeah. I got up on the very north end. Jerry's Landing Resort's not open anymore, so a lot of people have to access the south end. But I came across some real nice perch. Not the numbers I'm typically used to, but again, there was a lot of smaller ones. You're going to find a lot of perch in these lakes all around us.
But when it comes down to perch fishing, if you had, say we're going to Aloika. You show up at Aloika, what is the very first bait that you're going to run right off the bat, no matter what?
Some of my sponsors are going to be like, Eric?
Yeah.
But typically, they're one of my sponsors. But that right there, the demon, they call it, from Custom Jigs and Spins. I don't know if you can see it, but just look it up. It's called the demon.
We'll zoom in later.
Yeah, don't worry about that. But no, that is my go-to. When I was a kid, not a kid, probably early 20s, we caught 300 perch one day on that lure. 300.
Where were you at?
Don't never keep that many fish. That took 6 hours to clean those. We had a hell of a Super Bowl party. Fish didn't go to waste, but I would never keep that many fish again in my life. I'm lucky I keep 20, 25 anymore.
My primary go-to is going to be a small tungsten jig. I'm going to tip it with, for me, when it comes to perch, it's anything white, anything gold. So I'll run a gold tungsten jig head, and I'll have a small little white plastic off the back. Or if you are running maggots, what's really nice about it's kind of a hard presentation to do, but if you can take a maggot and you can actually thread it on, like you would take a night crawler, you stick it through the nose of the night crawler, thread it up the hook, do it that way. If you can do that same thing with a maggot on a small tungsten jig, it's hard to do without popping them. But there's a certain place that you can really just tip it, thread the maggot onto the main shank. So you got my hand is the tungsten jig, this is the hook, your maggot is threaded onto the main shank of the hook, and then you tip one right off the end of it. It's a white presentation, it's a smelly presentation, but that gives you the opportunity to, which I was wanting to talk about earlier, is the jigging cadence, especially when it comes down to crappie. Jigging cadence is everything. I take a lot of clients out there, and some people do really well and some people don't, just because they can't figure out that jigging cadence. I try to explain it that the main thing you want to do, you're talking, you got a 1/4 inch, if that, sticking off the tip of your tungsten jig. And as you pop it and you do that quick little, it's almost like a shiver, what that's doing underwater, and you can see it on underwater cameras and stuff like that, is it's making that tip just kind of flick. And so what I tell my clients is if you can tickle their nose with that little tiny plastic, you want to jig it so much, so small and so subtle that you're literally tickling their nose with it, just like a creepy feather.
Yeah.
And then smoke it.
And the thing too with perch, I always get this remark, and sometimes even when I'm on the ice, I have a pile of perch, and somebody's like, "Hey, they're real shy today. We only got 2. How'd you catch 30?" One thing the Vexlar is going to tell me a lot, how they're reacting to the bait I'm using, if they even want it, if they want maggots, plastics, maybe an eyeball. A lot of times we use an eyeball. Yeah. So if they're shy, I notice, like if I'm dropping a lure down to them and immediately they start pushing to the bottom with it and don't want nothing to do with it, I'll start maybe downsizing my lure and going down to like even a 3, maybe even number 4 tungsten, and like Brian said, thread that maggot on. I typically don't thread it on like he does. I have, and it works amazing, and it stays on there a lot longer.
It's a lot smaller.
Yeah. But yeah, just your smallest tungsten you can get. I notice sometimes they'll be a little less shy. Just watch your presentations as well. They don't always want the typical spoons or another one of my really fishy baits and is a spoon. I mean, I grew up using Swedish pimples. I'm Swedish, so I thought, I'm gonna use Swedish pimples. They got to work, right?
They had a Polish pimple.
I don't know. Sorry. So this is a tungsten spoon, very small perch pattern. Perch are cannibalistic. They eat the ton out of each other. So that's another go-to lure of mine. A small spoon. Something flashy. He was saying gold. Gold's a good pattern. I was once told by a very fishy man,
Dave Gins.
If it doesn't matter what color you use as long as it's gold.
Yeah.
So don't bypass gold. Gold's a very fishy color.
Yeah, for sure.
But spoons and just that small flat profile I like. And tungsten is my go-to for a perch.
I had a lot of fun. I mean, as the company man here, I had a lot of fun jigging them up with that 1/16th ounce sonic bait fish. I was fishing it off the back, and that was the first time I'd ever used that Vexillar. And it looks intimidating when you first see it, and then you actually start just playing fish up, and you're just it was the funnest time. And we just fished that little sonic bait fish, and we fished it in glow white or gold, and just tipped it with a maggot. Do you remember when I caught that perch and it started spitting out all of the baby perch? I just started throwing baby perch on it, and all those jumbos were just munching it. And I had a little perch dispenser until it froze up because it was 30-mile-an-hour winds out there. But that was fun.
Sorry, speaking of 30-mile-an-hour winds, that episode is going to be on Northwest Fishing Reports this Sunday.
Sunday, right after football, Eric, a couple other the Clumdog Outdoors crew, Bobby Loomis, and the Northwest Fishing Reports crew, we went out and had a hell of a weekend. It was Super Bowl weekend, actually, a year ago? And we had so much fun. So that airs at 4:30 p.m. on Q13 Fox in the Northwest. And then I'm assuming it'll be on YouTube afterwards, but I'm stoked.
Me too.
I'm excited to see it.
I'm excited to see what that weather is going to look like. Because I wasn't paying attention. We were busy catching fish, putting people on fish, and it got pretty brutal with those winds and over those mountains. It was pretty cool.
It was. I mean, Rob, and I'm gonna expose Rob here real quick because Rob forgot his gloves, and we had Todd out there, and Todd was like, "I don't need gloves. I'm from the Midwest. No problem not having gloves. It was cold. I could not have survived without gloves." He just gave Rob his gloves because Rob, brought, essentially rubber gloves with him.
No, that was funny because Todd was on the snowmobile without gloves, standing out there. I mean, Todd's a tough character, man.
That sounds terrible.
I'll never be that tough.
No, me neither. No.
Never be Todd tough.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that video because I wasn't able to make it last year. I had a bunch of other stuff going on and couldn't make it happen. But when I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm getting the updates from all the guys, and I'm just I think I was in Boise with my family, or
I was there for a whole week. I was there before you guys. I had other arrangements with Clam Outdoors, another team I'm with, and that was such a fun time.
I was like, man, one week I can't be there. You guys are doing all this cool stuff. Oh man.
Going back to Todd, I'll throw something in there just because I got one on my neck here. This is some of you guys probably see this on all of our necks. They're becoming a little bit bigger out here. They're huge across the Midwest. They're called the T2 toothpick. They're from Cold Snap Outdoors, another company we're with. Check them out. Something which great about these is you're not crushing the paint jobs on those fancy lures we have or those small tungsten, or even using forceps, which
it's a hook remover.
It's a hook remover. Yeah. And I go back to Todd and look him up too. He's a great fisherman. He's the originator of these. He made them out of toothbrush handles and would file them down with a little notch. And that's how they got started. And that's why they're called a T2 for T-square for Todd. But yeah, they're called a toothpick. They're great for removing jigs, especially our small jigs we use for ice fishing.
And those little tungstens, when you're catching perch or you're catching rainbows, it's hard to get down in there. And you almost literally got to just shove your finger in the mouth to get it out. But these little toothpicks is...
And without injuring a fish. Yeah. We do a lot of catch and release.
Exactly.
CPR we call it, catch, picture, release. And the least amount of injuries we could put on a fish. You know, that's the thing too with the sport getting as popular.
I'm going to talk about conservation.
As it's getting, you start seeing people, you know, it's not so much we don't have limits on most of our lakes for perch. So you see some of these people just keeping buckets of perch, which, whatever, to each your own, but just think about the future. Or when you're releasing fish, think about how you're harming them, if so, by de-hooking them. Yeah. Another thing I think about, especially ice fishing, fish don't have eyelids. So I say that because a lot of people will take pictures of fish laying on the ice sideways like a big bass. And we have all done it. I've been there. I've gotten excited. I've been by myself. Oh, I got to get this picture. Mm-hmm. And you lay this fish on the side. Well, now this ice is breaking down its armor. You know, they got those scales and their slime. That's their armor. So once that starts freezing, their eyes are freezing. So what I always recommend, if you plan on just catch and release that day, get that picture if you want quickly. You get that thing back in the water. Don't expose it to the cold air or lay it on the ice if you don't have to.
Yeah, when you start talking about days like you guys are out there at 30-mile-an-hour winds, and just like our experience in this week, 30-mile-an-hour winds, you pull a lake or you pull a trophy perch out of the ice, and you sit there and you hold it. And if you're more than like a minute and a half or a minute out of the ice, you can see the very tips of the fins start to turn white, right at the very tips, like your fingernails. They start to turn white. On the tail, on the dorsal, that fish is literally starting to freeze immediately. Granted, one thing that there's a lot of guys that do fish for trout, and they're very particular on how you hold your fish. I've gotten blasted by a bunch of people just by posting pictures on the internet, and I'm holding a trout, and they're like, "Hey man, your hands aren't dry." Or your hands are dry. If your hands are dry and you're holding that trout's going to die.
Crazy,
Oh man, I understand it because that's what it is you're trying to protect their armor. When you grab a fish and it's slimy, that's their armor. There's certain ways that you should hold it. You can only get so particular and picky with it. You can't just be blasting everybody on the internet and being kind of a background troll, telling them they're not holding their fish right. They're not doing that because they're the ones, they're experiencing it. They're excited. They're doing the thing. But fish conservation is huge, especially out at Curlew. Since you're going to be out there, I completely understand keeping fish and doing what you need to do. But when you see pictures of guys that have a sled full of 200 to 300 perch day after day,
gross.
Yeah, that's not necessarily conservation. I understand you feed your family, you get what you get, you eat it, but don't over-harvest. Even when it comes to burbot is getting really popular around here lately. And it's a very sensitive fishery. If you're catching a burbot that's in the smaller range, you don't have to keep every single burbot that you catch just because they're delicious. We need to conserve the fisheries. You catch a burbot that's in that 30-inch range, that's probably a 10, 12-year-old fish.
Sure.
If we over-harvest those, we're going to run out of the trophy burbot fisheries that we have locally. So just keep that in mind. Be a conservationist as well as a fisherman. Eat what you're going to take home and release what you're not.
And on top of that, I've seen a lot more is garbage people posting. Not so much on these lakes, but a little bit in like central Washington. A lot of garbage.
Easy. I'm just kidding.
Right. But no, a lot of garbage left on lakes. Propane tanks, maggot containers, worm containers, pop, beer, whatever. And don't cut any hole bigger than 8 inches. If you need a 10-inch, whatever, but
it's legal.
It's legal.
But for a perch,
Washington recommends nothing over 10 inches. But a lot of posts here recently where we're seeing manholes which are not safe at all.
Yeah, we're not legally. You're not allowed to sight fish here.
Yeah, we're not sight fishing here.
Sure.
So
or spear fishing or nothing, you know. So there's no need for a big hole like that. I've seen a few on some of these lakes where we fish where guys will make maybe like we call burbot bass just to keep them a little bit more fresh.
Yeah.
But just don't make those big holes, and don't bring chainsaws out. That's not good.
Yeah.
That's extremely important. I hope everyone listened to that. I appreciate you guys bringing it up. That's stuff, you know, we got to, you know, just conserve all of these. This is what we love to do, right? And
Absolutely.
And it's getting more popular. We're just seeing more and more people. So it's either worse, or we can just start now and say, hey, let's nip this in the bud.
This has been the biggest burbot year I've seen ever.
Yeah.
People are just absolutely, which is why I'm guiding for the burbot and doing that in the open water. But when it comes to ice fishing, I really choose not to guide for the burbot. I'll go out and I'll target them. And
they're spawning in the winters, you know?
Right, yeah.
And February is a really hot spawning time for them. And sometimes that's maybe that's when you want to leave more.
I mean, it makes for great fishing, don't get me wrong.
It's
I ain't going to tell anybody to go out there and not catch them, but my main thing, if you're catching small fish, let them go, let them grow. If you're catching big 30-plus inch fish, let them go. Those are breeders. That's what's going to breed the future generations, just like the kids. Eric and I are very passionate. Eric does a bunch of seminars for the Boy Scouts, and we're all about getting kids into this industry and, you know, helping the future generations of fishermen. But if we go out there and we over harvest, it's going to be just like it is right now. Man, in the 90s, I was catching 7-8 pound bass on a regular. In the 70s, you can go out there and you can walk across the backs of those steelhead, man.
Yeah.
So it's going to be the same concept with our local lakes. We need to conserve the fisheries and be mindful about what we eat, what we harvest, and how we handle our fish.
And when it comes to the panfish, Washington, I almost said it. They don't like anything but a trout, you know.
Yeah.
Sure.
Trout.
So they've killed lakes that have had really nice bluegill. Oh, this has too many bluegill, we gotta kill the lake. Or this lake got infected by perch, we gotta kill the lake. Again, go back to Curlew 7 years ago, ice fishing that lake, you'd come across a lot of 12s and occasional 14s.
Yeah.
And on an occasion, now if you see a 12, you're happy.
I haven't caught one over 12 in the last 2 years, and I probably pulled. Last time we were out there, between three of us, we got 300-400 perch topside. We released 90% of them. I brought home 12.
I brought home, I think, 25 that night.
But the biggest, and even the year prior, me and my wife, Tawny, we'll go camping out on Curlew for Valentine's Day weekend. We'll sleep on the ice and do that whole thing. And you get 2 full days of fishing out there. You're putting hundreds of fish topside. But I've caught like one fish over 12 inches in 2 years out of there.
Yeah.
It's consistent 9.5, 10.5, beautiful eater perch. But I personally have not caught more than 1 or 2 over 12 in the last 2 years.
But with our lakes, not necessarily just stocking those panfish, you know, they'd rather eradicate those fish. That's the thing. If we're eradicating them for the state, then that's what we're doing. We're not going to have that fishery later on.
Sure. They gave me some for a few fish in the area.
That's just my opinion. Yeah, let's roll some questions.
We got some good questions. Scott asked tips for Idaho perch. I just scroll back a little bit, Scott. All right, here's a good one. Eric Broughton. You guys know who Eric Broughton is? Eric kind of like pioneered jigging with the sonic bait fish in open water for these walleye. He did it on Banks Lake. We went out there. You know, every TV show's gone out with him and done it. He asks, "What's the biggest fish you've caught on the smallest jig?"
Oh man. So on the smallest jig, because I was running
smallest lure, smallest lure jig, biggest fish through the ice.
So
probably close to a 7-pound largemouth on a small number 5, number 4 tungsten.
Yeah.
With like 2-pound test.
Sure.
Yeah.
I caught I think it was a 13 or 14 pound pike in the chain lakes of Idaho, running one of those 1.5-inch Euro tackle Z crank.
Yeah.
And we were running it slow. We were fishing for perch and bass. and then my rod just loads up. I thought I was stuck in the weeds. Pull it up, I felt one head shake, didn't think nothing of it, and I'm just slowly running 4-pound test on this tiny little thing, and end up pulling up a 43-inch pike that was 13, 14 pounds, and yeah, that was, yeah. Big, and that's the main thing, especially when it comes to this time of year. Whenever we're fishing through the ice, their primary forage of these fish are not feeding on minnows. We don't have minnows in our local lakes. We don't have the chubs. We don't have the shiners. We don't have any of that stuff. The main forage of all the species of fish, primarily that we're going to target here in eastern Washington, is going to be bugs. They're feeding on zooplankton. They're feeding on mysis shrimp. They're feeding on dragonfly larvae. They're feeding on all kinds of different
kind of
things.
hatch.
So that's why we run these smaller presentations. I see a lot of guys out there running way too big a profile baits for the target species that they're going for. You need to match the hatch, and the primary hatch is bugs. And so if you can have a buggy presentation, you're going to catch a lot more fish. They're going to be smaller. It's with most species, it's big bait, big fish. If one's going to hit it, he's probably going to be.
But again, the other day I was catching perch on the little demon here,
Yep.
and I caught multiple pretty good size largemouth bass out of Loiga just on that.
2 or 3 pound bass.
Yeah, 2 or 3 pound bass here and there, and on that little rod, I mean, you get a bass. It's like, oh my, But at the same time too, I think going back to like that bug hatch, I would always, like I said, I would always fish Swedish pimples or some kind of a spoon for these panfish when I was younger. I had an old timer one day just raking the fish out of the holes, and I was wondering, why is he catching them and I'm not? So I walk over, and he did the same thing where he had a pimple on with that dropper, like the attractor, and what he was using was beaded head flies. Yeah. And I'm not a big fly fisherman. I got all the stuff to do it. I just don't do it. But what got me really into fly fishing and the gear of it all and tying flies was ice fishing. And that was because this old timer named Howard showed me his rig, and it was just a small beaded head fly. And he was telling me about the bug process as well in the winters. And the thing is too, a lot of these, if you catch and perch, they're full of eggs. So as they're spawning right now, they don't like any kind of bug hatches inside of their nests or their beds, because once you get the bugs infested in your nests, they'll mess up with the eggs and wherever they're going to lay. So they see that buggy pattern and they attack it. They don't want it in their beds. They don't want it near them, especially if you're fishing weeds.
Oh, yeah. Well, on that same what do they call it, the Michigan rig?
Yeah, the Michigan rig.
Yeah, but that same presentation, you can take a sonic bait fish, you can take a crippler, you can take a humdinger, and all you got to do is remove the hook. You can run any of these baits in line, and that's a really big thing. Running those baits in line is an attractor. The fly, the small tungsten below it, is what they're going to target. They're going to see this big bait flopping in the air, or in the water, sorry. They're going to come up, they're going to target it, realize that it's a little too much for them. They're going to drop down, and they're going to really feed on that little buggy pattern that's down there checking it out too.
That's another thing that we haven't talked about yet, and it's sitting on the desk next to you. And your automatic fisherman, it's new to you.
Yeah.
You talk about fishing stuff in line, using something like that, and using like a smile blade, like pegging it on the line. Just something super small, subtle, but also gives you all the flash and a little bit of movement you need. But anyway, I want you to talk about that, because we did have a question about your automatic fisherman.
Yeah, so right now this is set up for bourbon. One of my last trips, I was fishing Loic last week, but when I was using this, it was for bourbon. So that's how this is set up right now. But typically, it's all the same. This might need a little adjustment depending on the rod you're using. This rod I'm using is a stiff rod because I was fishing 90 feet. I wanted that hook set stiff and that backbone nice. But you put it on the trigger. I got
Careful.
Right. Oh my God. Send Brian to the ER. So I got the line. It comes out the tip here through this groove, and your bait will hang down into the water or your hole. And so Washington, you can have a 2-pole limit. This would be one of your poles.
Right.
So typically I would put this off on either some structure or somewhere near that I want to fish, or somewhere I could see. Always keep it close. You got to be close by.
Yeah.
And I'll be either hole hopping or in my hut jigging. So this was set up with, of course, the sonic bait fish just touching the bottom of the lake with cut bait on it.
So basically, your bait's in the mud, your jig is suspended.
Yeah, it's just suspended. Depending on what I'm fishing for, if it's crappie, usually, or trout, it's going to be suspended or in the zone where I'm seeing them. And I find that zone with my fish finder. So I come over to the hole, I set it up, I look, find where I want my lure on my fish finder, get it exact, set it all up. So what happens is, if I'm over in my hut fishing, and it's a pretty distinctive thud, and pretty solid base.
Before you trigger that thing, make sure.
But so a fish comes by, they pick up your lure. Sometimes you can have a bobber hanging here, what I use, so it takes a little bit of line, it doesn't feel that tension. Once the tension does hit, it pulls that trigger and it sends that. So I didn't want that to happen, but that's what's going to happen. It's going to send that hook driving right in that fish's mouth. And I caught, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 burbot that day that way, just with this.
So running jaw jackers is a very productive technique when it comes to most of the species of fish that or not jaw jackers, but automatic fishermen or the jaw jacker style. Most of the species that we target around here, if it's a rainbow, if it's a crappie, if it's a perch, the main thing is where you're sitting at in the water column. What's nice about the fish finders is we've spent so much time with them, we can see if there's a fish on the bottom. Most of the time it's going to be a perch. If it's suspended 10 feet below the ice, it's going to be a rainbow. If it's down 15, 20 feet below the ice, depending on your depth, it's probably going to be a crappie. But the main thing with that is if you don't have a fish finder, because I know most people that go out ice fishing, especially nowadays, it's getting to be super popular and there's a lot more people involved with it, is just kind of list them over saying if you're targeting trout, go 10 feet, but use your hands. Go one string, put your foot down, go another string, and put it down. That's going to put you 10 feet below the ice. It's going to give you a rough estimate. Use your hands to measure the depth of water that you're at. Try to get a base idea if you don't have a fish finder. How deep are you fishing? When I go out there to a lake, if it's a new lake or if it's a lake I haven't been productive on, I'll go to the Navionics if I have it, if the lake has that. If not, I start at the shallows and I just drill a string of 6 to 8 holes going out, I don't know, maybe 100 feet, and then test it with your line. Be like, oh, if you figure your hand, our span is probably like 5 feet.
Maybe.
Most people are, 5.5, 6 feet, whatever it is, figure out what your length is between hand to hand. Start dropping it down, figure out the depth, fish it for a minute, go to the next hole, figure out the depth, figure out where those transitions are. Transitions are a big thing. Humps, where like if you're in an off basin and you find an offshore hump or something like that, that's going to hold a lot of fish. Figure out what depth you're at, even if you don't have the fish finders. We rely on those so much, it's kind of dumb.
I would fish with this before my hole.
Right, but there's ways to go about it without having a fish finder if you don't have one.
Sure. 2 more questions, and then we're going to get out of here. Quickly, are you guys using fluorocarbon on your leaders, or does it depend on species?
I run straight monofilament across the board. If I'm going to target lake trout, which we were just doing, I'll run 10-pound Power Pro with a 15-pound mono leader. I'd run straight to the jig. Alex Pringle, he runs a 3-4 foot leader with a little barrel swivel.
Yeah, typically I'm just running mono. Usually, very seldom do I run fluorocarbon, unless I know there might be toothy critters. If I'm back fishing somewhere else that might have some toothy critters, but usually it's just straight mono. I mean, I've used it since I was a kid, and that's what I'm used to, and it works great. The mono we have these days are pretty low stretch. I mean, yeah, you're going to get that stretch a little bit more abrasive, but
it's not bad.
No, it's not bad at all. Very typically do I use any kind of braid unless I'm fishing really deep and I want that hook set. But
lake trout.
Yeah, and if we're talking ice fishing, braid holds water, and when it freezes on your reel, it creates a mess.
Very bad.
So they are creating newer ice lines and special braids that are made for ice, but they don't soak up as much water. But typically, it's just mono for me.
Right.
Perfect. Last one, and it's another Cascade question. But I'm going to do Michael a solid because I think Michael wants this information for himself. But if you're going to take some kids out and you just wanted to find somewhere with decent parking or not too quick of a hike, is it possible to get out there and get on Cascade? And what kind of depth are you looking for?
Oh man!
If I was going to do that with some kids, a great place, and you're going to find. So typically, when I fish Cascade, I fish sometimes 30 feet. I like the 30 to 20 some feet, sometimes even up to 12. But right outside the city launch, it's called the city launch.
Is that where we went out of?
What's that?
Is that where we went out of?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, with the right there and the big park lot.
Right there.
Yeah, right there
There's
at
golf
the back
course
side.
right there too.
Yeah. So that's a great spot. You could walk right out there and get into fish.
A lot of people do the Poison Creek,
But Poison Creek would probably be the best.
It's a lot of what I've heard and the reports that I've gotten is when you head out of Poison Creek, you still got to walk a ways. You're not going a mile plus, but you still got to walk a ways out there to try to find a little bit deeper water and try to find some sort of structure in that main basin there. But
the thing is,
there's
with that
a lot
lake,
of smaller fish out there in Poison Creek though as well.
yeah, the thing with that, like he says, structure. There's not so much structure if you're trying to find that river channel, the old river channel, in there, and just trying to find these steep banks.
Which is where depth maps will be your savior, especially out of Cascade. Like I said earlier in the deal, we're going to be doing the Cascade tournament. We spent a lot of time out there, the Cascade Cup. But if you look at a Navionics or you look at some sort of depth chart on Google or something like that, it's going to show you where the original river came through there before they flooded it out and turned it into a reservoir. And that original cut right there, what the perch do is they travel up and down that old river channel, and then they'll move up onto the basins or up into the flats and the shelves up there to do their feeding because you're out there at Cascade. You got 8 feet of bait fish, literally. Like you pound the bottom and you just bring it up, and our fish finders just turn red for 8 feet, and then these tiny little marks will come up, and so there's so many bait fish in there, and then all of a sudden that wall of 8 feet will disappear. And you'll see just a chunky mark come up, and that's those bigger perch. But that's 22 feet, 30 feet of water. The Sugarloaf Island, that's one of the main primary go-tos for most everybody. But there's a ton of lake. Outside of Poison Creek, you'll catch them. I would say the city launch would be the way to go.
Yeah, for kids, taking a group of kids would probably be city launch.
Yeah.
Cool. Before we go, how do we get a hold of you guys? I know Brian, you're guiding. I don't know how busy you are, but how can people follow you? We got social media information at the bottom of the video here. But is that the best way to get a hold of you? Or?
Yeah, no. If you guys ever want to go fish with me or something like that, I got clumdogoutdoors.com. Has a lot of it's basically my guide page and stuff like that. You can hit me up on Facebook at Brian Clum or Clumdog Outdoors. Me and the whole pro team keep up on those messages, so you can contact Eric through there as well. Or just check if you check out the Clumdog page, it's got my phone number on it. You guys give me a call, shoot me a text. I get people hitting me up all the time on Facebook Messenger and through text messages and looking for ice information and wanting to go fishing. And so we're more than happy to give you guys any sort of advice or tips on our local lakes. We've been working our whole lives at this. We're more than happy to share the love of the sport and help you guys out any way we can.
Yeah, like he says, we don't shy away from giving out tips and reports, and I get hit up probably 5, 6, 10 times a day.
Yeah,
by questions,
which is awesome. That's what it's all about.
What I do, and
we're here to
I'm
teach.
always on. But so I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Whoever did, I wish I was seeing everyone who was here.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I appreciate our sponsors and Max Lures for putting this on. And
thank you, Britton.
Thank you, Britton, for putting in your time.
No, I appreciate you guys putting in time for me. This has been really fun. You guys were guinea pigs. This is the first time we've done this. So I hope you guys liked it. We have a lot of good feedback. We have a ton of people watching. It's been an awesome seminar. And it's time. Brian's had a long day. It's time for Brian to go home.
Really am, yeah.
I'm gonna take all these tips and go catch me a bunch of trout and perch this week.
Sweet, yeah.
Yeah,
Man,
man.
I can't stress enough. Get a hold of us. Anybody out there, if you want any information when it comes to target species, when it comes to bait presentations, when it comes to structure, even in the open water. We're out there on our boats. We're out there off the bank. We're always in the open water. We want to help everybody out as much as we can. So you guys don't be afraid to get a hold of us. And we're here to help.
They're there. They're here for me too. I appreciate you guys. We will see you on the next stream.
I can't wait to hear your reports.
I'll let you guys know.
Okay.
See y'all.
See you guys.
Yeah.